Coming up next on This Week in Computer Hardware, we talk about the new GeForce GTX 780 graphics card, Z87 motherboards galore, a new Vertex SSD, and the Xbox One. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 219, recorded on May 23rd, 2013. x86 in your Xbox One. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Ting.com. Ting is a new mobile phone service that makes sense. Save money with Ting, pay for what you use, doesn't require a contract, and offers unlimited devices on one pooled plan. To save $25 on your first Ting device, visit twitch.ting.com. That's twitch.ting.com. Hey everybody, welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. Twit's weekly show that focuses on all the gadgets, all the stuff that powers the gadgets inside your PC, your gaming PC. We'll even talk about some consoles today because some interesting news has come out from that. Patrick is not with us this week. He is in a family full of sick people, so he is either sick with them or taking care of them. So we gave him the week off. Filling in for him is my very good friend, Alan Malventano, all the way from San Antonio, Texas, I guess.
Where they know what sauces taste like.
That's right. And you were a little bit sick, but obviously not as sick. So no. We should be good to go, right?
Yeah, we should be.
All
Hopefully.
Right. So let's just jump right into it. There's a whole lot of stuff that happened this week. We'll start with some new product releases. The first is the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 780 graphics card. Now, what's interesting about this release is that it is the same GPU architecture as the GTX Titan that came out, a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, maybe a little bit longer than that now. It is GK110 GPU. It's a huge GPU, 7.1 billion transistors. So when you hear talk from Microsoft about a 5 billion transistor part in their new game console, keep in mind that this is a 7.1 billion transistor GPU, only the graphics portion. It has 2,304 CUDA cores, shader processors, whatever you want to call it, 3 gigs of memory. And it is basically taking what the GTX Titan was, cuts it down a little bit in terms of performance, memory capacity, and sells it to you at a lower cost. It goes from 6 gigs of memory to 3 gigs of memory, 2,688 cores to 2,304 cores. Those are kind of the really big important specs. Power levels are about the same. Memory bandwidth is about the same, even though you have less capacity. And the price of this card is $650. So as I posited in the review that I posted on PCPer.com, that you are probably one of two reactions. One of them is, that's okay, I was never going to buy that anyway. Or the other one was like furious rage that NVIDIA would dare release an X80 card, 680, 580, 780 card at such an enormously high price. The 680 is still around as of today. The Titan is still around. The 690 is still around. And as of right now, we don't have any idea what the plans are for NVIDIA's kind of the rest of the GTX 700 lineup. But the mindset that NVIDIA has for this part is pretty much like this. The performance of the 680 is close and comparable to the performance of the Radeon HD 7970 from the competition. And they're close. 7970 is a little bit better in single configurations. 680 is better in multi-GPU configurations. But they're close in performance, and they cost about $429 to $439. What I think many consumers would like to have seen or would have expected to see is the GTX 780 comes out, replaces the 680. 680 drops in price. 780 comes out at $499, something like that. And we see a waterfall effect of GPU prices going down, and we see innovation going forward and all that kind of stuff. So that when the 8970 comes out from AMD, it's going to be at $499 or a little bit less. And, we see that competition back and forth. And instead, what NVIDIA has done is said, people seem pretty comfortable with the prices where they're at. We release a Titan for $1,000 and people still buy it. So we're great. And they'd sold a lot of Titans with that mindset. The mindset being, this is a flagship product. This is a desirable product. It's not a commodity product. We want to price it as such. It's the reason Louis Vuitton handbags cost so damn much. It's not because that their value is any inherently better, right? Or the craftsmanship is inherently better. It's just there's a name associated with it and there's a prestige associated with it. So when you get a GTX 780 that looks like this, you're going to be impressed. And this has the same industrial design as the Titan, except instead of saying GTX Titan here, it says GTX 780. Otherwise, it's very similar in design. You've got, here, I'll hold that a little still for you, GTX 780 there. Still got the plexiglass window so you can see the heat sink, which is actually kind of cool. I love the silver and black design of the card, I guess. The lights on top. This is actually an LED light. You can control it through for flashing and pulsing and brightness levels through some software that some of their partners are going to provide. And it's a really nice card. It's a single huge monolithic GPU, just like Titan was. It performs between a 7970 and a Titan, as you would expect. It has, I would say, a 15 to 20% edge over the HD 7970 in the higher end. And there are a couple of cases in our testing where it was closer to like 1 to 5%. I forget what those games were, maybe like Dirt 3 and Sleeping Dogs or something like that. Single GPU wise, I don't really know how to phrase it any better. I don't think it's a very good value part. And the thing is NVIDIA doesn't care about that. They're not positing it. They're not promoting it as a value part. But here is the best value for your dollar that you can get for a high-end enthusiast card. That's not their stance. Their stance is, if you want the best of the best, we think we make it, and here you go. You pick it up for $650. The problem is you can save $220 and get a Radeon HD 7970 or a GTX 680 today. And that is probably a pretty compelling option for people now today that maybe even didn't think that the 680 to 7970 were such a great deal yesterday. You know, it's kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. When we get into multi-GPU testing, the SLI is much better than Crossfire still. We still have the same frame pacing issues, frame metering issues on the AMD setup. It still has frame latencies. It still has high frame time variation that creates unsmooth animation when you're using multi-GPU configurations. And the 780 is much less likely to see those types of things, just like the 680 and the Titan were. It's not completely void of those issues, but it is much less likely to happen. So, you know, my kind of summary for this review was, I don't really know who this is aimed at. Like, if you're the super uber, I got to have the best of the best everything, you're probably going to get a Titan, or you're going to get a GTX 690, or maybe a Radeon HD 7990. Although I don't recommend it because of the Crossfire issues. And if you're an enthusiast, but you're kind of like, I want to get the most bang for my dollar, the most performance for my dollar out of an enthusiast level part, you're probably going to get a 680 or 7970 because those are much better on the, let's say, dollar per frame rate metric than you're going to get with this. So this kind of sits in the middle. I don't know how many people will find themselves in that middle location of the market. I don't know. Alan, I know you don't really focus on graphics cards much of the time at PCPer.com, but I didn't know if you had any thoughts or ideas on this.
I would say that if I hadn't already bought a 680, and this might be in that middle ground spot that I might go for. Me personally, I just always go NVIDIA just because I like their drivers better, but that's a personal preference. But yeah, I mean, if I was in the market for one right now, I might actually be leaning towards that middle ground. A Titan is just out of my budget. Sorry. You know. So
you consider the 780 at $650 like a middle ground of what, though? A middle ground of the high-end parts?
Right. It's just performance for given that you don't want to necessarily do SLI. You want the monolithic design. You want everything just all on one unit. Yeah. Also, part of that equation is I like to water cool. And guys that like to water cool don't necessarily want to buy 2 water blocks.
Yeah.
Right? If they can get away with buying one, then, it's that much cheaper. So that might actually put me, more on the fence of the middle card.
I guess that's one way of looking at it, is that this is the second fastest single GPU graphics card you can buy, right? And you're stepping down. It's $350 less than the Titan. It's $220 more than the 680, but it's $350 less than the Titan. So I mean, you might be able to view it as closer to the 680 than it is the Titan, and therefore, you know, maybe get you to reach up just that last little bit of investment to get the 780.
Right. And, you know, if you go just off of the cost, it's like 2/3 the cost of a Titan, roughly. And the performance is much better than 2/3 of a Titan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's definitely closer than that. So as is usually the case, as you step up in the stack, whether it be in the CPU world or the GPU world, you are paying more for that extra performance, right? So while you could get 1.1x performance for $200, to get 1.2x, you're not going to pay the same amount that you were per you know, performance metric as you would in the lower realms, and that continues to be the case. You know, the 780 is not a bad card. I really don't think it is. It performs great. It's very quiet. It's power efficient compared to the HD 7970. It does a good job. You know, we're seeing retail models like this one from EVGA. They're going to be custom designed. You know, the PCB is the same, but the cooler is going to be unique, and they're slightly overclocked. So we're starting to get those in, and it's, you know, it'll be interesting to see kind of how the rest of the market reacts. I don't think AMD is going to lower prices. I don't think NVIDIA is going to lower prices of any of their existing products. And I think that's the disappointing part for me, and I think for a lot of consumers, is that if you can't afford a $600 graphics card, what you hope is that this new $600 graphics card comes out and pushes that $400 one down a bit, or that $500 one down a bit. And I don't think we're going to see that with this. So check out the review. We got all the benchmarks, more analysis. You can get details on like what bundles there may or may not be. Actually, I need to go back and edit it because I found out late this evening that the 700 series is apparently not going to ship with a free copy of Metro Last Light. So that, you know, it kind of takes a little bit out of the sales on that, just in terms of getting a $60 value out of your $650 graphics card. But such is life. Let's move on to another subject. We brought Alan in here, well timed, I think, because we have a couple of storage stories we can discuss. The first of which is a review of the OCZ Vertex 450 256 gig SSD. So it's not a 450 gig drive. 450 is the model number of the part. What is different about this Vertex as opposed to the other ones we have seen in recent months?
All right, so this is a little bit confusing. First of all, there's the number thing. All of these manufacturers seem to be wanting to shift over to the number scheme, which I'm pretty sure Intel was the first to introduce. With all the Intel drives are 3-digit something or another, and now their enterprise drives are all 4-digit something or another, which is a little bit cryptic in itself. Now OCZ sort of moved over to that camp, and I think they did it because they want to consolidate the name, really. So the reason I say that is because the Vector, which is previously the fastest SSD we'd tested, actually still is, well, it was sort of its own line, right? It was the new version of the ND-Lynx Barefoot. And then you had the Vertex line, which has been around for a very long time, which is on its like 3.5 generation, whatever you want to call that, because they just released a Vertex 3.20 recently, which was 20 nanometer flash, which we reviewed last month. All of the Vertex drives were all SandForce. And then there were different names for all of the various other controllers that OCZ had used over the years. And when they did their restructuring last year, was it late last year, I think? They sort of hacked off a bunch of those names, and they just stuck with Vertex, and then that was SandForce with a really high-grade memory. And then there was Agility, which was asynchronous flash, just a slightly bit of a lower grade, lower speed flash memory. Same kind of controller, same everything else. And then there was the Vector just sort of sitting off to the side. Well, I have a feeling the Vector is just going to fade out because the same controller, or I should say a newer version of that controller, designed around 20 nanometer flash, is now the Vertex 450. So it's basically the newer version of the Vector. It's just called the Vertex. It's weird how they juggled that around.
Are they keeping the Vector name?
I don't think so. Not with, if they
Hmm.
did, it would have to be for something else entirely, because now
Okay.
the Barefoot 3 controller, which was in Vector, is just a slightly newer rev, and it's in the Vertex.
Okay.
So
Great. Awesome.
yeah, and along those lines, I don't know where the Sandforce controller is going to go either. It might just go away, or it might stay in the Agility. Who knows? But
I know their plans were to kind of consolidate all their SSDs into a few brand names. Vector, Vertex, and what's the third one?
Agility.
Agility, right. So I would have
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that controllers would be the differentiating things in the line there. Maybe it's just relative performance of the rest of the market, so they feel like IndyLinks is maybe coming down a little bit for that. I don't know.
guess. I don't know. It used to be that the line's names were distinctive of the controllers that were in there. This sort of confuses that a little bit. But I will say this. So you basically picture a Vector, which is a Barefoot 3 controller, and then there's a slightly newer version of the Barefoot 3 controller in this new version, Vertex 450. And that is driving 20 nanometer flash, whereas the Vector was driving 25 nanometer. Both of the flash memories and both of those drives were IMFT, Intel Micron Fab based memory that OCZ decided to go with. Back with the Vector, they did that new thing where they were packaging the flash memory themselves because they said it was cheaper that way. And now with this model, they're just going with the off-the-shelf, straight from IMFT packaged flash memory. Unsure why the switch back there, especially since the idea of going to 20 nanometer is to reduce the cost, right? So you'd figure that's when they would pull out that stop again and do that same kind of move. We're not sure really why. The other usual disadvantage you see if you move from 25 nanometer to 20 nanometer on the same controller is a little bit of added latency, mainly because it's a smaller process. The write times, the erase times are a little longer on that kind of memory, just because it's smaller. You're trying to only store a certain number of electrons in that space to program.
Okay.
Just basically to store bits in a cell, right? And now you've hacked off 20% of what was already a very small volume to store a charge. So you got to be a little more careful when you're trying to write and erase this stuff. Usually that equates to slightly slower access times. So I was sort of expecting that here. I didn't really see it. This drive is easily 95, 98% roundabouts of what the Vector is. And I say that on the hardest test that we run on SSDs, which is our IO meter tests, which is about 3/4 of the way through the review. That's where we're throwing just crazy mixed workloads, all different sector sizes, offsets, reads, writes simultaneously. And there's 4 different chunks of those patterns that we throw at the drive. And it did very well. It did right up there with the Vector all the way across the board on all 4 tests. There wasn't any particular test that was an outlier where all of a sudden it wasn't going as fast. It was basically as if it was a Vector, which is darn good, right? Now, the Vector was kind of pricey. That was the downside.
Yeah.
This drive, 20 nanometer flash, I'm hoping they can keep them on the shelves, because this is the huge deal I see about this is you have the same performance as the Vector, but the pricing is $1 a gig or less, depending on the capacity. And that's MSRP, introductory MSRPs. That's not even wait for the prices to come down sort of thing. So when a drive launches at $1 per gig, that's good on its own for even a mediocre performing drive. Whereas this is like one of the fastest that exist. And it's still $1 a gig, which is just amazing to me. So I really hope that they can ship a whole bunch of these and really just flood the market with them, because everything else, you're just looking for deals. If you want less than $1 a gig, you have to find it on a sale, right?
Yeah.
And 256 gig model, which is the sweet spot, 92 cents a gig MSRP. I'm hoping that the manufacturer or that the retailers, they all stick to that and they don't go any higher than that.
Right.
But that can only happen if OCZ can provide the volume, right? Those guys are going to have to jack up the prices that they keep selling out.
I saw an email come across from OCZ where they expected these to sell very well when they actually started hitting store shelves next week. So that's good news for them. They, we try not to take sides in the market, but they're a company that needs a successful product financially to keep them going, right? And I think enthusiasts in general, us as a group would be at a disadvantage if OCZ suddenly disappeared from the market. There are very few people that really push and promote the SSD product lines like OCZ does, right? You know, Intel kind of backed off. Corsair doesn't do much like super great promotion and differentiation stuff. Samsung does a pretty good job, but you know, they're a huge corporation. They don't necessarily get into the same types of things that OCZ can. So, you know, I'm excited for it. I want more SSDs. I want them cheaper, and if they can sell them even cheaper than that, that'd be great by me. But
they could potentially, right? Because if there is a sale, what's it going to do? It's going to be lower than the MSRP. I hope.
Yeah, well,
the point of a sale,
I hope
right?
so too. I hope so too. All right, let's talk about Z87 motherboards. We're going to go over this real briefly, guys. Asus and Gigabyte allowed us to do previews of Z87 motherboards. These are motherboards that are going to be coming out for the next generation Intel processors, Haswell, that kind of stuff. We couldn't go into performance. We couldn't get into overclocking capabilities or anything like that. That's all under embargo until we get to the Haswell release, which is June 1st or 2nd or something like that. It's around the Computex timeframe. So the first batch we looked at was from Asus. They have, you know, several different lines. Everything that you know of is continuing. They have the ROG line, Republic of Gamers. These are the ones that have all the bells and whistles, all the overclocking capability, mini PCIe combo slots with a what's that new storage SSD slot they have on there?
M.2.
Yeah, yeah. So new that apparently there are no SSDs for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I personally don't see why they changed the format. It's not like the old format had fully caught on and everybody was using it and it was time for something new. There was nothing wrong with it.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'll have to ask them next time they're out here, because I know I remember there being a specific reason why they migrated away from it. But they don't even have any performance ready testing. They have qualification ready testing modules, but they don't have any like ones that are, you know, kind of tweaked for performance and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. You know, you've got the Maximus 6 Gene, which is like the micro ATX. You've got the Extreme board, which is the one that's going to support quad SLI and has a whole bunch of crazy features on there. They have like an external OC panel that can either sit on your desk and allow you to modify timings and overclock settings and voltages, or it can actually fits into a 5¼ inch bay on your case. They have the Tough series of motherboards, which are the ones that are kind of built for longevity in mind, less so about performance and features. But if you look at that one right there, that's the Sabertooth Z87, where they have like thermal armor, they call it. So it's like a plastic coating, you know, frame over everything. It comes with little accessories to plug all the slots, so you don't have to worry about getting dust in them, or less likely to have any kind of accidents and that kind of thing. They have a micro ATX version of that coming out as well called the Griffin that will sell the armor kit separately. They also have their standard series of boards. If you go to the second page, you can see their new color scheme is gold and black. So if you don't like gold and black, sorry, I hope you don't have a window on your case, I guess. But their workstation boards, their mainstream boards, you know, they've got Thunderbolt in them. They've got a lot of them have 802.11.AC, which is nice to have. Intel controller-based gigabit Ethernet on all the Ethernet ports on the higher end boards as well, which is another advantage. And then there's a lot of overclocking stuff that we obviously can't dive into yet, but we'll have more on that later. So that's the Asus lineup. Gigabyte had an event that we went out to, and they showed off some things as well. They have 3 different lines: Extreme OC series, a gaming series, and a Thunderbolt series. They were very proud of their new dual BIOS, right, on the Gigabyte side. They have their BIOS is actually interesting because it has 2 resolution options. If we go to the next story, Burke, you'll see like on the first page, there's like screenshots of a UEFI dual BIOS with kind of like an orange and black color scheme on there. And you can actually hit a function key and it'll switch between a higher res version and a lower res version. The higher res version lets you see your CPU status information, your system status information, your memory status, and all that kind of stuff, kind of surrounding everything, and you can see it at all times, which is kind of cool. But if that's too small for you, and you want it, you have harder time reading it, you can change the resolution and get kind of like a more standard look at things. That's pretty cool. The other
that BIOS cracked me up, by the way, because they put like these nice 3D appearing, but they're just a flat background. And it just sort of threw me back. It threw me back to like 90s gaming on VGA monitors where, they're trying to make it look nice and it's like not really 3D, but they try to make it look that way.
The orange screenshots are like lava coming out of the ground type of thing. Yeah. If you could actually see the detail of it, it's very much that way. But you can actually replace the background with any image you want, right? So that's actually kind of interesting. We've never really seen that before. Their OC series of boards, very targeted for LN2 type overclocking, really, really, really extreme overclocking. They even have a button on the back of these boards that when you push it, it's actually a really cool feature I like to see on other boards. For people that just do case modding, it actually turns all the power on to the fans, to the water pumps, to the lights, anything that you have hooked up to auxiliary power, but doesn't turn on the system. Right, so you don't actually have to boot the system. So if you build a really cool case mod, you can actually just hit this button, shut off the machine, and all the lights and fans will still spin, and the pumps will still move, but you don't have to worry about actually running the processor and graphics and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. But it's only on these really overclocking ready options. Yeah, you can see the BIOS screenshots there.
I think it's to help with condensation for those guys.
Yeah, that's why they do it on the overclocking side, right? Is that the fans will keep spinning, and any possible LN2 or dry ice or whatever it is you're using doesn't have a chance to kind of not evaporate, I guess. Yep. If you go over to the gaming series page, this kind of has a cool feature. They have replaceable op amps, which are like electronic devices that they're used to like modify the sound signal coming out of the Sound Blaster controller on the motherboard. I didn't have a whole lot of experience with these. Actually, no experience with these before going to this event. And it doesn't support the surround sound stuff. It's only for dual channel, stereo headphones. So you can either hook up good quality headphones or a good quality 2.1 channel audio speaker set, and then you'll be able to, I think the motherboards will ship with 2 different op amps, and then you can buy any number of them from Amazon or any other outlets that sell op amps. It's an industry standard kind of form factor and stuff. And we got to listen to a couple of them and see how the same audio file changes based on the op amp that you use. I don't know how super impressive it really is. If you're a real big audiophile, I don't know if you're interested in onboard audio, even though it is a Sound Blaster controller going through an op amp through your output on your motherboard, or if you're really, really audiophile, like somebody like Patrick would be, then you would assume that they would have like their own kind of external setup. But this might be a good middle ground to check out some of these new technologies and get in there. And like I said, some of these op amps are going to be like $1 to $5, and then some of them are going to be like $40 to $50. So depending on what you want to try out, you can do it without spending too much money. But that's kind of like one of the main big features of the gaming series. Did you have any op amp support, or not support, but experience?
I have plenty of op amp experience, but not much when I'm trying to just amplify audio with it, because op amps are used for anything analog. That's what an operational amplifier. It's just supposed to amplify an analog signal. Could be, anything. So, and the reason there's all different types is because there's different frequency ranges. There's different sorts of things that you want an op amp to be able to handle. And if you're only doing, audible kind of frequencies, usually they just go cheap on the op amp, right? They just do an op amp that's only good up to like 20 kilohertz, that sort of deal. Gotcha. But if you were, those $40 or $50 op amps are ones that are designed to handle much higher frequency ranges and much better amplification in the output. They can drive things, just be a little bit more powerful or whatnot. But really, if you have a decent one, you're probably 90% of the way there, and to the point where you're not going to notice. And if you're, and actually you tried a couple of them, right, Ryan? And And what was the, on the podcast last night, on our podcast on PC Per, you're basically just equating it to different like equalizer settings.
That's what it felt like to me. Like some would have more bass on the low end, and some would maybe, but to me, it was kind of like when I go to these fancy events that have really expensive wines, right? And I'll drink it, and I'll be like, yeah, it's pretty good wine. And then somebody will say, yeah, do you taste the coconut or the almond in this? Do you smell the aroma of this? And I'll go, yeah. Now that you mention it, I kind of sure, I can see that in there. And so somebody gives me these audio demonstrations and points out, don't you see the crispness of the snare drum in these ones and how it amplifies things? I can go, yeah, right. But I wouldn't have been able to point that out necessarily beforehand.
The thing that I will point out is that it's very easy to get carried away on spending way too much money on an op amp to the point where you forget that, well, you might have really good headphones, which might have cost you a bunch, and the op amp might have cost you a bunch if you decide to do that. But the chip that's driving the op amp only costs like $10. The actual digital to audio converter that's on the motherboard, that's before you even get to the op amp, it's not going to be this crazy several $100 part, right? Because the whole motherboard is a couple $100 and it's got a bunch of other stuff to do. So the op amp, garbage in, garbage out. You can buy like a $3,000 op amp and you're going to hear all the defects that all the other stuff does. Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that. And actually, speaking of not wasting money, I'm going to see if I can work in today's sponsor a little bit early, since we talked about this first stories for quite a bit. And that is our very good friends at Ting. They are a no BS mobile service. They are an MVNO, mobile virtual network operator. They're a reseller of the nationwide Sprint network, essentially. But what this means is you don't have to deal with Sprint or any other company for your cell phone service. Ting is different in that they don't have contracts, they don't have ETFs, no termination fees. It's truly and completely contract free. There's no bundling or ride-along services. You actually just choose how many minutes you want, how much data you want, how many text messages you want, and their rates are the same depending on, they're not trying to get you into that unlimited plan for that extra $5 if you don't actually need it. There's no overage charges. There's no penalties. If you use more than you thought you would on this plan, you actually just pay for the next step up, right? And what's great is you get credits on unused service. If you use less than you thought you would, if you signed up for the 1,500 minute plan and you only used 900, they'll back you off to the 1,000 minute and you get a refund of that difference on your next bill. That's pretty awesome. And no other cell phone provider that I know of, especially none of the major ones, are doing anything like that. There's no add-on charges for voicemail and that kind of stuff. No mysterious line items on your bills. They charge you for what you used, plus whatever taxes they are legally required to collect. No recovery fees and that other stuff that you see on your cell phone bills or cable bills or anything like that, that are all just extra fees for that operator. You can get unlimited devices on any plan. You can have as many devices as you want, sharing pooled minutes, messages, and megabytes. No hidden charges. Each device only costs you an extra $6 per month. So you know up front what you're getting into. It has a powerful online account control panel. Take control of your mobile data account, unlike any other provider allows you to. Your usage, your bills, all there. If you call 1-855-TING-FTW, T-I-N-G-FTW, anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern, a real person will pick up the phone. A real live person. I had called several customer service organizations today, and none of them did that. So I find that to be astounding. They have excellent online support as well. Help.ting.com has active customer forums, a simple and powerful help ticketing system, video tutorials, video startup guides, and much more. So here's how it works. First, you purchase your mobile device from Ting, which you will receive in 2 to 5 business days. Then you activate your device and have the option to select a new phone number or to port an existing one. Finally, you select the monthly minutes, messages, and megabyte plans that you think represent your usage, and Ting will bill you at the beginning of your payment period, but you will be charged or credited in the following period based on what you actually used. So the difference in this is that you are buying your hardware up front rather than getting a discounted phone device or even a mobile hotspot device at a discounted rate and paying over the long term over a 2-year contract. If you go to twitch.tv twitch.ting.com, twich.ting.com. You can actually use their calculator and figure out how much money you can save, or your company can save for that matter. And you put in all the data, all the information that you think you need, what you're paying for today, get your bill out, see how many minutes you actually use on that unlimited plan, and put that in at twitch.ting.com and figure out where you actually stand. Twitch viewers also save $25 on your first Ting device when you sign up. So visit twitch.ting.com and start saving today. And we thank Ting for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Now, let's get back into some news items. This kind of cropped up on us this week. HGST, who I learned kind of embarrassingly last night that is a part of the Western Digital Company. I had totally spaced out on that announcement, I guess. Is releasing a 1.5 terabyte, 2.5-inch hard drive that is 500 gigs per platter. What's important about this? Is it the platter density that is interesting here?
No, actually, because most of the current shipping laptop hard drives are 500 gig per platter these days. For example, the Seagate drives, the hybrids, right? They're 500 gig per platter, available in 500 gig or 1 terabyte, right? Which is 2 platters. The catch here is that HGST managed to shoehorn 3 platters into a 9.5 millimeter standard 2.5-inch laptop drive. So 9.5 millimeters is it's considered a little bit on the thick side these days, with thinner form factor shipping from ultrabook form factors and whatnot. But the tried and true standard thickness of laptop hard drives was 9.5 millimeters, and they managed to fit those in there. I'm imagining these platters are very thin or thinner than normal and still have the same density, which is still a significant kind of thing that they're able to pull that off.
Cool.
Yep.
In case you guys hadn't heard, another console was announced this week. Microsoft unveiled the Xbox One. Some people love the name. I think it's incredibly confusing, considering it is the 3rd iteration of the Xbox device. And I saw a picture going around that showed, if you Googled Xbox One image search and then you did a Bing image search for Xbox One, that the Google results showed all the new device, and the Bing results, which is a Microsoft company, showed like 75% the original Xbox, 25% the new Xbox One. So even their own search company can't seem to figure it out. So what's kind of interesting here about the Xbox One announcement is that we got to see some of the hardware specs. It is an AMD APU based x86 processors, Jaguar cores, GCN architecture. That's the same kind of graphics architecture in the AMD Radeon 7000 series. 8 gigs of RAM, 500 gigs of storage, Blu-ray, USB 3, 802.11n, HDMI in and out, so you can actually pass through your video to watch TV and that kind of stuff. The only spec that they actually gave out in the presentation was that it was a 5 billion transistor part, which doesn't tell us a whole lot, especially when they mentioned that it had on-die embedded SRAM, which basically means that it has onboard, not flash, but memory on the chip, maybe not on the chip, but on the substrate to act as a cache, right? And I think we ended up learning it was like 32 megs of on-die or on-chip memory, much in the same way that the Xbox 360 had on-chip memory as well, to kind of aid in performance and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into too much about the gaming side of it because we don't really focus on that here. The controller looks cool. The hardware looks large. I think it looks okay. It just looks like a big piece of AV equipment. It doesn't look new and exciting and sexy or anything. I am a little confused on why it needs to be so big, because this APU that is in here won't need that much cooling, right? Unless maybe they're doing something awesome, like they're passively cooling it. I don't believe that's the case. That would be really impressive to see, but otherwise it just seems large. They spent a lot of time talking about TV. They spent a lot of time talking about Call of Duty Ghosts. I don't know. It's Josh is telling me, and he must be listening live. He says cooling will definitely be required, and the cooler is big on this thing. So it apparently is going to pull a lot of power. What is kind of maybe interesting to discuss also is the comparison between the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. Both of them are using x86 AMD APUs with graphics core next based graphics systems. They're both custom designed parts. What is interesting is PlayStation has gone with, they both have 8-core Jaguar processors. We'll talk about that in a second. But the PlayStation 4 has 1,152 graphics processors, stream processors, Radeon cores, whatever you want to call them, while the Xbox One has 784 of them, something like that. So 784 versus 1152. That's actually a fairly significant difference in graphics performance. But consider that the Sony implementation, the PS4 implementation, does not have on-die memory. It has a integrated GDDR5 memory controller rated at, I think, 170 gigabytes per second. But then the Microsoft Xbox One only has a DDR3 controller, but with that onboard SRAM, the combined memory bandwidth is actually very, very similar to what you get on the PS4. So it seems like they kind of had two designs to get to very similar performance levels. I know there's a big discussion going around on forums all over about did Sony actually design for a graphics heavy configuration while Microsoft developed for a very kind of multitasking heavy experience, being able to switch between TV and web and gaming all in real time, all very quickly, all through voice activation and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting to kind of debate that. Josh had some really good points last night. If you didn't listen to the PC Perspective podcast last night, you should check that out over on our website, where we kind of discuss why one might have gone the other route. So keep in mind, even though there are some differences, and they will be important in the long run, the real story is that they are the same, essentially the same architecture. x86-based processors, AMD Radeon-based graphics systems. That means AMD Radeon is powering the Xbox One, the PS4, the Wii U. They have all of those design wins. That's huge for AMD. And we'll be very curious to see how that kind of puts back pressure into the PC market. Will developers now say, well, we have to focus on an AMD architecture because that's where all of the, the console market share is. And so as a result, will AMD users benefit from that on the PC side? It will be interesting to see what that actually comes out to and what NVIDIA kind of responds with. Any thoughts on this Xbox One versus PS4 battle, Alan?
I think it's nice to see that they're a little closer on hardware, but I will say that the differences that do exist, think about it. Go one generation or two generations back, there were always these huge differences. But at the end of the day, the graphics were usually similar from, the same game ported to both. Whoever the game designer was, they would figure out where the strengths and weaknesses were of each respective console, and they would sort of design around them. And the end result was, roughly the same, right? There wasn't really anything where just mind-blowing graphics on one thing and really crappy on the other. They were always sort of comparable between both consoles. They might have one console might have its really pretty game that wasn't ported for the other one.
Yep,
sure, but again, at the end of the day, roughly equivalent, right? So, and this sort of, I think they were equivalent,
but I would say that they were very different architectures. So you really had to choose one or the other to design for. And you poured it over, right? And so that port always kind of suffered a little bit because of it.
Yeah, because again, completely different architecture, and now it'll be x86 across both, and I think Microsoft just played it a little. Sorry,
no,
I think Microsoft just played it a little safer. By going DDR3, just because that's what they're used to dealing with when it's a PC type architecture versus Sony sort of doing their own thing as far as architecture goes. Still, even though they're designing around x86, they're like, no, we'll use DDR5, right?
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see when, how close to launch it will be. I don't really know, but that first game that comes out that will be on both platforms. Where we'll be able to do like direct head-to-head graphical comparisons. I think there's a lot of, there could be some validity to the argument that it seems that Sony designed for, we're going to make the best gaming console, and Microsoft designed for, we're going to make the best home theater media device. That will be great at gaming, it'll be great at TV, it'll be great at browsing the web on it, right? And I wonder if it will lose a little bit of its performance edge, maybe because of that. I don't know. It's possible that things like the SRAM implementation really make a huge difference in terms of performance. They don't need the extra processing cores to do that, but it'll be interesting to see either way. Which leads us into the next set of stories, because both of these consoles use the Jaguar. Actually, I got a lot of flack on our YouTube channel for saying the word Jaguar instead of Jaguar, or I don't know, however non-Americans pronounce it. But both of these will use Jaguar-based APUs with GCN architecture. And Josh did a really good write-up comparing Jaguar to Bobcat. Jaguar is not a super high-performance core, but it's a much more power-efficient high-performance core. And he kind of goes into the changes that they made to the architecture. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about what those specific changes were. Changes to the memory system, changes to the actual execution unit stages and all that kind of stuff. The overall result is, on a core-to-core basis, clock for clock, AMD is estimating that their IPC improvements, their actual performance improvements, is in the 15 to 20% range clock for clock. And then you take into account, again, that the Jaguar cores are going to be able to run at higher frequencies than the Bobcat cores before it. And you see that it's actually a pretty compelling part. Now, in our discussion here, for a kind of the parts, the APUs that are actually going to be sold to PC users, they're all quad core or dual core, no 8-core combinations. The 8-core versions are very much custom designed for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. So I don't know if we'll ever see those in the PC or in what form factor and that kind of stuff. But if you're interested in the kind of nitty gritty of the CPU architecture, make sure you read Josh's article. It's called Jaguar plus GCN, the computer architecture for Tamash and Kabini. It's really good stuff. Speaking of Kabini, Kabini is the last little bit of news here. We actually got a Kabini reference notebook when we went to visit AMD in Toronto a few weeks ago. This is the AMD A4 5000 is the model of this APU. And what's interesting about Kabini and Tamash, these are completely new APUs. They're not based on Trinity. They're not based on anything. They're based on the Jaguar cores plus GCN designs, but they target a segment of the market that there really is no direct competition to right now. Kabini kind of sits between the low end of Core i3 parts and it's definitely above the current Atom parts, the Atom SoCs like Clover Trail and that kind of thing from Intel. And as a result, it kind of was difficult for us to do performance comparisons, because if we compare it against Clover Trail, it totally dominates it. But if we compare it against like kind of the higher end Core i3 stuff, it's much faster than Kabini as well. So the target audience, I would say, the target market is like the $300 to $500 low cost notebooks, tablets as well, even with these products. And then it's actually a really compelling option. The performance isn't going to blow you away, but the battery life and platform efficiency is actually really, really, really good. Our system was a 14-inch 1920 by 1080 screen with the A4 5000 APU, 4 gigs of memory. I was a little disappointed that they shipped it with just a standard 5400 RPM spindle drive, but I guess for that price range, that kind of makes sense. Gaming, I played BioShock Infinite at 1280 by 720, settings on low, but I was able to play it. I played it with the controller and I played it with the mouse and keyboard, and actually was very responsive. Even maybe more impressive was that the fan on the side, while I was playing it, never even really got warm. The air coming out of it never really even got warm. It was a thin and light laptop. It wasn't an Ultrabook necessarily. It didn't quite meet those specifications, but this is a very early reference design. It's not an ODM part. It's not something that's actually going to be for sale. But it was surprisingly thin. And considering it only had a 45 watt-hour battery, which is pretty modest for laptops today, it got 6 hours and 45 minutes of Wi-Fi web browsing battery life on it. Actually, if you go to the last page and you kind of look at the battery and power consumption results, you'll see how we kind of broke it down into minutes per watt hour. And it was, I'd say 60 to 70% better than what we have with Ivy Bridge today. Now, obviously, Ivy Bridge from a CPU architecture is much higher performance than what you get with Kabini. Not a doubt about it. But you know, things like the A4 5000 getting the reference system getting 9 minutes per watt hour, while the Microsoft Surface RT, which is based on Tegra 3, an ARM architecture platform, was getting 13 point something minutes per watt hour. 13.4 minutes per watt hour, I guess I'd say. And that's a lot closer than we expected it to be. Not blowing everything out of the water, but it's very competitive. It's better than all the other x86 platforms out there, it seems, in terms of platform efficiency. And its real competition won't show up until the end of this year, the very end of this year, with Bay Trail, the Silvermont architecture from Intel that we talked about a few weeks ago on this show, that will come into tablets, super small clamshell devices, and even down into phones at super low wattage variants. So AMD is in an interesting spot with this because they don't have competition, direct competition, I guess. But what they need is a good product. You know, if they try to sell this reference laptop, it's not going to impress anybody. You'll get some sales because it'll be $399 or $499 or something like that, and it's fine. Its keyboard's kind of cruddy on it. The touchpad's kind of cruddy on it, but it's got USB 3 and it's got a 1080p screen. It's going to get pretty good battery life. What they need is something that's like cool and sexy, like if Asus were to build one of their Ultrabook style designs like you have, yeah, but with this, and be able to get, like, if you could put like a 65 watt hour battery in it and get 10 hours of battery life and just really make it a good product, you'd have to pay a little bit of a premium, and it would be overpriced for the performance you get, but maybe it would not be overpriced for the portability that you get with it. I hope AMD does well with this. They need to do well, kind of like we were talking about OCZ. They need to do well with it, and even better, it's like I think they have a really good part. They just need to make sure it gets into designs that people actually want to use.
I think it'll be easier to fit that design into something. And I don't say Ultrabook these days is actually, they sort of got a little bit bloated like a year after they first came out, right? They first came out, everything was razor thin, but the performance was kind of and the battery life was not necessarily that great, right? So people wanted more performance and they wanted more battery life, and then all the manufacturers added millimeter after millimeter, and now they're just sort of like guppies. You know, they're just, they got thicker, right? Actually, the second version of the ZenBook, right? I have the first version of it, which tapers thinner as it gets towards the front. And then the second version of it, they just kept it the same thickness until like the front.
Did they put a touch screen on that one?
No, not the second gen. Okay. But they added like backlit keyboard because everybody was asking for that, and they added a hard drive instead of just the SSD stick style that was in there. But to fit the hard drive in there, they had to increase the thickness across the whole, back to front. So
not the best.
And not the best situation, right? And a lot of the manufacturers did the same kind of thing with their respective Ultrabook designs. This design I've seen a lot of right, this design right here, as much as it sips on power, a manufacturer could get away with the original Ultrabook kind of mantra.
Oh yeah,
right.
If you look, when I take off the back of it and look at the cooler, there's like no heat sink to it, and like I said, the air coming out of it was incredibly cool, even while I was playing games on it. So you could probably get away with a much thinner device, a much cooler, attractive looking unit than what we got here. Right. It's really compelling. And then like you were saying that, like I've seen Ultrabooks like the X1 Carbon from Lenovo, which I loved. Yep. They add a touchscreen to it, and all of a sudden now you've got a little bit more thickness on the display, and they can't taper it off like you were saying, and so now it loses a lot of its like sex appeal, which is one of the reasons people buy Ultrabooks. It's not because they're great deals; it's because they look cool and they're desirable devices. So I just want to see AMD get into something like that with this type of device and see what the response is. Right? Maybe it'll flop. Maybe it'll sell like gangbusters. I don't really know, but I want to see them do well with this part because it's really, really interesting. Hopefully we'll get Tamash parts in soon. that are kind of, they're branding them performance tablets. That's what their kind of market they're going after. 10, 9, maybe down to 7, but mostly in the 8, 9, 10, 11 range of tablet sizes, convertible tablets, that kind of stuff. It's all about portability, battery life. As long as it's usable, I think people will be interested. So it's interesting. I hope they do well with it. I think that's it. I think that's all of our news for the week. We got time for we'll do a couple of emails real quick. Please send us your emails. We live on your questions. We need them here. Twitch@twit.tv is the address. TWICH@twit.tv. That goes straight to Patrick and I. We filter through your questions and select some of them to use on the show each week. Let's take one here from Steve about when to buy an SSD. He says, on your blog or on Twitch, can you cover SSDs and when is the best time to buy one? Is there new technology in the way that will bring the price down? Are prices like memory going to level off or increase? My thought is a Samsung 840 Pro. I have a 6 gig file maker database that I use throughout the day. Thanks for the show and contributions. What do you think, Alan? Is there a clear-cut way to know when prices are going up or down?
Honestly, I think the best thing on that is we, among the PC Perspective group, we have a back room sort of a chat thing, and we're always throwing deals up there, and then one of us will pick it up as a news piece.
Yep.
So I would just say check PC Perspective, the news section, just right on the front page, because that's where we'll usually put deals. Jeremy's usually pretty good about throwing something up there if there is one. It might be a few minutes after all of us have ordered one, but it'll still go there.
Today, in fact.
That happened today, in fact, yes.
And actually, before I actually placed my order, because I was kind of just debating it and kind of laggardly doing it, probably on purpose because I didn't really want to buy them. Samsung 840s, the TLC version, not the Pro, a 500 gig version was $277, which is like 55 cents per gig.
Yeah,
right.
That's crazy cheap.
And that's awesome. And now it's on back. It was on, then it was, I saw it was in stock, and then it was like ships in 3 to 5 weeks. And then it was the product had been taken down from the Dell website. So if you didn't get in, then
I would say, check the Newegg does the shell shocker deals every so often. Buy.com has SSDs. They blow them out every so often. You see them all over the place. You just sort of have to do the rounds, or just find a couple of news sites that are going to post up things like that. If you do the rounds yourself, chances are you're going to catch the deal even quicker.
Yeah. But I don't think there's any clear-cut way of like playing the stock market, like trying to know when prices are going to go up or down. We saw that with the hard drive market, where like there was a big natural disaster and prices spiked up. I think you could have guessed that, but it's pretty hard to say. I think in 3 weeks SSDs will drop by 15%, and I don't think anybody can tell. At least none of us.
I will say that you could probably get some good deals over the next week or two on Vertex 3 and below.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Just because a company's brand new model comes out, go for the previous generation if you're happy enough with that performance, and if it does it for you, you're probably going to find them 50 cents a gig.
Maybe the GTX 680s are going to be cheaper thanks to the release of the 780s, right? So yeah, take that into consideration. Let's do one more email. This is from Adam. Let's see what this is. We might have already addressed this. After taking a look at the specs of the Xbox One and PS4, I've noticed that they are amazingly similar. Both are using integrated CPU, GPU from the same chip maker, have the same approximate system memory, storage media, connectivity, etc. Can you think of a game console era where the hardware was this similar? Do we think that makes the price and therefore frequency for Sony and Microsoft buying third-party software exclusivity even higher than in the past? It would seem to me that the difficulty in porting to the other console is probably much lower this time around than it ever has been. What do you think? Do you think like console exclusives are more likely or less likely thanks to this type of move?
Well, going back to that first part of the question where console era where the hardware was that similar. Yeah. You have to go way, way back when there was a whole bunch of different like consoles where you had like Atari Lynx and all those, right?
I couldn't even tell you what the hardware was in those. I have...
Well, most of them were based on Motorola, like 6000 series something, or the precursor to it, right? But I think a lot of them were based on that kind of microcontroller architecture. And so that would be your answer to that when they were that similar. But I think they were all programmed completely differently because they were all different. I mean, everything else was different. It's not like you had people cross-porting a lot of games to different things, or if they did, that whoever the other team was, it wasn't necessarily a port. It was like they just had to remake the game for whatever the other thing was.
You know, Josh pointed out in the comments for the second part of the question that apparently Sony's still going to use OpenGL and Microsoft's still going to focus on DirectX. So
yeah,
there will still be engines that work better on one platform than the other, then in theory, right?
Although it's not horrible to cross port between those two. Right? It's
non-trivial. I mean, there's a reason everybody picks DirectX, right? And there's not a whole lot of OpenGL engines on Windows anymore. So Josh saying there's a lot of convergence of the two, and it may be the case that as these APIs have progressed, they are maybe getting more and more similar. But I tend to side that I think we'll have the same number of exclusives because it's all about the money. It's not about the technology, right? The people that are making the engines, that are making the games, they're more than willing to spend the time to get on the PlayStation 3 as well as the Xbox 360. But if somebody comes and writes you a big fat check to say, make sure Halo is on the Xbox only, or make sure Uncharted is on PlayStation 3 only, then that's what's going to happen. And I think that will still happen in this generation of systems. What I hope kind of gets excluded from that, I don't know if the console vendors are going to be dumb enough to do it. I hope they are. Well, they will kind of forget about the PC and say, you can be on the Xbox One, but you can't be on the PS4. And they'll say, well, what about can we just release on the PC? I'm like, yeah, sure, nobody cares about that. And vice versa, because PC gamers missed out on a lot of that kind of stuff. You don't get Halos. You don't get good versions of Halos, at least. You don't get the Uncharteds. You don't get that type of stuff that I would like to see slowly creep its way back into the PC market, especially now that the architecture is identical, right? If you write a game for the Xbox One, chances are with almost no work, you can get it to run on the PC, and probably you can get it to work a lot better looking on the PC without much work. And same thing with
they'll be able to crank up a lot of the detail when they pour it over to PC. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, and apparently somebody in the comments undermined said Steambox is going to be on OpenGL. So puts another wrinkle in discussion.
I think I know why Microsoft made this one a little bigger and horizontal. Just based on their whole...
You talking about physical size?
Yeah. Well, not necessarily bigger than the 360, but you were saying that you'd expect it to sort of be smaller, right?
Yeah.
I think they want people to view this... I think, first of all, they want people to view it as sort of an entertainment center component, right? Because they're going for all that multiple UI sort of, thing comes in and you're viewing media and you have your game going and all that other stuff. So I think they sort of want it to be like as if it was a media component of your entertainment center, right?
Yeah.
And then, I don't think they're going to go smaller because regardless of how much heat it makes, they don't want another Red Ring of Death recall bonanza, right?
No,
they want to make sure this thing runs like room temperature, if at all
I'm really
possible.
curious. Seeing the Xbox One only made me more interested to see what the PS4 looks like. Are they going to be very similar? Are they just going to be the beige boxes of the console world
once again,
like PCs used to be? I don't know. It'll be interesting. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of the show. Alan, thank you very much for filling in for Patrick. I hope you feel a little bit better, and we all hope Patrick feels a lot better, and the rest of his family does as well. So what do you got? You got anything coming up for us at PCPer.com that you want to plug and promote?
I'm working on a roundup. Actually, there's no NDAs on this, thank goodness. I'm working on a roundup of Linka Media based SSDs, which we hadn't looked at yet. So the new Seagate models,
right?
Is it Seagate? Right? Yeah. No, wait, those are the hybrid guys. Here's one.
He's going to show us. Yeah. He's going to show us. What is it?
Seagate. There you go.
Seagate. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Seagate. Just pure SSDs, right? Based on Linka Media. Couple different models from Seagate side. There's a couple different models from Corsair. Actually, they did the Neutron and the Neutron GTX. So I just sort of balled them all together and we're going to compare them against some of the other heavy hitters and see, how they fare and cost per gig versus performance and all that stuff. So that's on the cooker. Kind of a big piece though, because it's 4 different SSDs all wrapped up into one review.
Good.
It turned into a monster.
For me, I have the pending doom of the Haswell launch hanging over my head. I know Maury is helping me out a lot. He's doing a lot of motherboard work for us. I have stupidly
I love that.
redone all of the redone all of our CPU tests. So I'm having to retest a bunch of things, and it's not going as fluidly as I had expected or wanted it to. So that's taking a little bit longer time. We have another GPU to talk about soon. And then it's Haswell. What else is on that list? Hold on, let me look at the dry erase board. Oh, mobility GPUs as well. We'll have some interesting discussions about mobility GPUs coming up in the next week or 2 as well. So make sure you stay tuned to PCPro.com for that. That will be it for this. Make sure you send us your emails, twitch@twit.tv. If you want to find all of our back episodes, it's at twit.tv/twitch, TWICH. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.
See if I can get the kitty bird going.
It's not going to work.
No, it's not going to work.
It's not a large enough cat.
She's too interested in that. Like whatever that is. Yes, that's you. You can see yourself.
What is that thing?
What is that thing? And why is it bigger than I am? Oh, it's like freaking her out.
Holy crap,
like everything's backwards.
There's a giant cat in here.
Why do you put that cat in that box? Oh, there it is again. Oh my goodness. Oh, you want to touch it?